morning. Happy Sabbath. We're going to be reading Rule 3. I'm going to be using the New King James Version. Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, "My daughter, shall I not seek security for you, that it may be well with you? Now Boaz, whose young women you were with, is he not our relative? In fact, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Therefore, wash yourself and anoint yourself, put on your best garment, and go down to the threshing floor, but do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. Then it shall be, when he lies down, that you shall notice the place where he lies, and you shall go in, uncover his feet, and lie down. And he will tell you what you should do." And she said to her, "All that you say to me I will do." So she went down to the threshing floor and did according to all that her mother-in-law instructed her. And after Boaz had eaten and drunk, and his heart was cheerful, he went and lay down at the end of the heap of grain. And she came softly, uncovered his feet, and lay down. Now it happened at midnight that the man was startled and turned himself, and there a woman was lying at his feet. And he said, "Who are you?" So she answered, I'm Ruth, your maidservant. Take your maidservant under your wing, for you are a close relative." Then he said, "Blessed are you of the Lord, my daughter, for you have shown more kindness at the end than at the beginning, in that you did not go after young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you all that you request, for all the people of my town know that you are a virtuous woman. Now it's true that I'm a close relative. However, there's a relative closer than I. Stay this night, and in the morning it shall be that if he will perform the duty of a close relative for you, good, let him do it. But if he does not want to perform the duty for you, then I will perform the duty for you. As the Lord lives, lie down until morning." So she lay at his feet until morning, and she arose before one could recognize another. Then he said, "Do not let it be known that the woman came to the threshing floor." And he said, "Bring the shawl that is on you and hold it." And when she held it, he measured 6 ephahs of barley and laid it on her. Then she went into the city. When she came to her mother-in-law, she said, "Is that you, my daughter?" Then she told her all that the man had done for her. And she said, "These 6 ephahs of barley he gave me, for he said to me, 'Do not go empty-handed to your mother-in-law.'" Then she said, "Sit down, my daughter, until you know how the matter will turn out, for the man will not rest until he has concluded the matter of this day." Amen.
Amen.
Good morning, everybody. It's beautiful to be together, praising the Lord's name. A blessed and joyous Sabbath to all of you, and those that are watching on via live stream too. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. 'Twas blind, but now I see. 'twas grace that brought my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieve. How precious did that name appear the hour I first believed. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come. This grace hath brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. When we've been met 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've no less days to sing God's praise than when we first began. We've no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun.
So in the office we have a couple people who hum. We got some whistlers. I'm one of the whistlers. And Jackie, we got a singer. So it's not uncommon to be in the office and hear singing, and it's coming from Jackie's office. So we're blessed to have her. I'm going to wrap up the last reading, and then we're going to get into our panel discussion. And in Esther 7 and the first part of 8, and I'm going to just paraphrase 7 and then read the first part of 8. So you have the king and Haman at Queen Esther's, some say apartment, some say house, at her banquet. And on the second occasion, the king once again said, "Tell me what you want. I'll give you half my kingdom." And the Queen Esther said, "If I have found favor with the king, if it pleases the king to grant my request, I ask that my life, and the lives of my people be spared." And we have the revelation that Haman is the one behind this decree. The king storms out in rage, comes back to find Haman holding on to Esther, pleading for his life. In the end of chapter 7, we see that the implement of death that he had designed for for Mordecai, was instead used on Haman. So in chapter 8, on that same day, King Xerxes gave the property of Haman, the enemy of the Jews, to Queen Esther. Then Mordecai was brought before the king, for Esther had told the king how they were related. The king took off his signet ring, which he had taken back from Haman, and gave it to Mordecai. And Esther appointed Mordecai to be in charge of Haman's property. Then Esther went again before the king, falling down at his feet and begging him with tears to stop the evil plot devised by Haman the Agagite against the Jews. Again the king held out his gold scepter to Esther. So she rose and stood before him. And Esther said, "If it please the king, if I have found favor with him, and if he thinks it is right, and if I'm pleasing to him, let there be a decree that reverses the orders of Haman, who ordered that the Jews throughout the king's province should be destroyed. For how can I endure to see my people and my family slaughtered and destroyed?" Then King Xerxes said to Queen Esther and Mordecai the Jew, "I have given Esther the property of Haman, and he has been impaled on a pole because he tried to destroy the Jews. Now, go, send message to the Jews in the king's name, telling them whatever you want. Seal it with the king's signet ring. Remember, whatever has already been written in the king's name and sealed with this ring can never be revoked." You know, as listening to the text that were written, we have some of the great lines of the Bible, right? We have the "wherever you go, I will go, such a time as this." I mean, these are, if you go into the quotable quotes of the Bible, these stories encompass two of those biggest quotes. If I could have, and Ray, do you mind helping Jonathan bring the table up? And we got handhelds. So we're going to shift here a little bit as I bring the panel up. And part of what really impacted me in looking at this lesson was in a conversation I had with a good friend of mine as we're looking at the Bible and doing a Bible study. She made the comment to me that sometimes as a woman, reading the Bible can be hard. And it really stuck with me because, and I think we can acknowledge there as men that there's parts of the Bible that stand out a little bit and go, yeah, that really was not a great. And I'm not going to give, I mean, there's really not even PG-13. It's pretty much rated R stuff that happens to women in the Bible. And it can be tough. And so as I was thinking about Esther and Ruth, and I'm going to pivot here a little bit, I thought about, well, I would like to hear from maybe a woman's perspective on Esther and Ruth. Amen. And I want to say, and hearing Jonathan back there reminds me that Jonathan this was not planned. I saw his title. If you missed the early morning devotional, please get it from Good News. Order that from Good News to get it because, and sorry, Ed, yours is probably going to be knock it out of the park tonight, but Jonathan knocked it out of the park. I thought that was a great conclusion to camp meeting, talking about the little girl, servant girl, that tells Naaman about how he could be healed of leprosy and how that was an ambassador. So we've kind of this morning, it's been a lot about women in the Bible and how appropriate that our lesson is on Ruth and Esther. And part of the illusion that the Bible study has been talking about has been how the church, women, that's an illusion that the Bible has used, that Jesus used as well to represent the church. So I'm going to invite, I'm going to start at the far end here, invite my panelists to introduce themselves and to share just real briefly, just off the top, what strikes them the most about Ruth or Esther in these stories, and then we're going to dive into the panel discussion.
Well, good morning, conference family. Excited to be here. Jeff, thank you for the invitation to talk about these amazing faith-based women. I would say Ruth and Naomi and Esther, all three. My name's Pam Solger, and I'm a member of the Camelback Church. I am the wife of Pastor Mark Solger. Often that is how people come to me. They say, "Oh, you are Pastor Mark's wife." And yes, I am Pastor Mark's wife. But I am really excited to be here. I am a professor of psychology, and don't let that scare you. I had a student this week send me a meme that I thought was super appropriate. It was a picture, and it said, "Oh, you're a psychologist? Can you read my mind?" And he said, "No, I'm not a mind reader. I'm a psychologist." So anyhow, I'm just super excited to be here and talk about these women. And I think one of the things that really, really stands out to me is this idea, is that faith calls for often bold action in uncertain times and sometimes often frightening and scary times. And the example that they all, and I would include Naomi in that because she was fabulous in standing as a woman who was alone. She'd lost her husband, lost her 2 boys, and was still able to move forward in faith and dependence on God through all of it. And so that is the part, kind of the big picture of what stands out to me in these.
Thank you, Pam. Good morning, everybody. My name is Rosemary Abrahams. I want to wish everyone a happy Sabbath. I see a lot of friendly and familiar faces out there, and that's very helpful. I am very moved by Esther. I'm humbled that she moved through fear, and I'm also humbled by the depth of her faith in God. I know that wasn't very easy, and I know that I myself in my life have not done anything that compares to what Esther accomplished. So she gives me hope. She gives me hope, just the amount of faith.
Good morning, happy Sabbath. My name is Sarah Oliveira, and I am one of the newest on staff at the Camelback Seventh-day Adventist Church. I get to work with Mark Sulger and John Stanton and Pam and Rochelle as well. And so I have lots and lots of fun. I specifically take care of the following departments: children, youth, young adults, and family. So I have lots and lots of fun. This morning I focus specifically on Ruth. Coming out here to Arizona was a huge step of faith in action for me that started in the month of December. And about 8 months later is where I ended up here. And there were a lot of pieces of red tape I had to encounter on my way out here. And so as I looked at both Esther and Ruth and Naomi, I found that I really connected with Ruth specifically, and the ability and capacity that she had to look at her mother-in-law and say, I will leave my home, I will leave my people, I will leave my religion, I will leave the way that I am used to dressing, I will leave my family, I will leave everything that I know to follow you. And it was because of the relationship that she had with her mother-in-law. And so I connected with that, because coming out here with my 2 boys, ages 4 and 6, in which I did not know anybody very well. I knew of some people, I had met some people, but I didn't really know anybody. No family, no friendships, no home, literally, as I U-hauled out here, no home. And so coming out here and seeing that faith in action, it was only because I knew God was specifically asking me to be here. And so it was because of the relationship that I had with God, and I saw that relationship that she might not have necessarily had with God, but she had with Naomi. And so because of that, she chose to follow Naomi to a brand new place.
I think we can wrap it up, right? No. My first question, and actually going off of what you're talking about, Sarah, is, so as we look at these women, Ruth and Naomi were widows, Esther's an orphan, Ruth was a Moabite, not an Israelite, Esther's a Jew in disguise, not a Persian. So my question is, what resonates to you? And you've kind of mentioned this a little bit, but when we look at the church, if women and church are this illusion we're looking at, then with these marginalized people per se, or people on the outside maybe from what the society was that they were trying to join, how then do we look at the church today through the eyes of looking at these stories? Pam?
I'll start with that. Focusing kind of on the marginalized. As a professor who accepts essays all the time from students, I kind of think of, right, this idea that everything in the middle is the written information, but everything on the outside, that's not where the information's supposed to be. That's the margins, right? And all students have to set their margins to be right. And I think as marginalized people, like, for example, Esther or Ruth or many, many people in the Bible, God's goal is just to set their heart right. It's to set their heart right with Him, to set the margins, because they're outside of the margins. And you know, Jesus, I think his ministry was outside of the margins. He spent so much time ministering to the people that were marginalized or kind of pushed outside of society. You know, he spent time with accepting children, speaking and inviting women into his ministry. He spent time healing and touching lepers. And ultimately, he died for the sinners. You know, we are all born in sin. We're conceived in iniquity. So we're born with a sin problem. And God doesn't hold that against us, but he does say, hey, I have a solution. I have the answer, and that's Jesus Christ. And all we need to do is accept that answer to go from the outside of the margins to the inside.
I think of people who are coming into this country, they're seeking a better life, and I am pleased when I see them embraced, loved, accepted, taught, and welcomed in. I know that with my own family, when my grandparents came to this country of ours from Bolivia, their neighbors reached out to them. Their neighbors took care of them. Their neighbors taught them that this can of food in the grocery store are for dogs, and these cans are for human consumption.
Wait, were they looking at the veggie burger?
Yeah. Well, so they were embraced, and yes, that was a time of assimilation. You know, this is in the early 1960s when they came to this country of ours. But they were taught some things of our culture too, to help them to move through this life. And my grandmother became wonderful friends with all her neighbors. And she would make some strange food, sure, compared to the food that we eat here. But they would take it and they would thank her. And some grew to love that strange food over the years. And she accepted their Christmas sugar cookies. And so I love in these two stories the way that Naomi took in Ruth, a Moabite. I love in this story that Esther and her family were able to live in Persia and continue their traditions. That speaks and resonates to me just because of the way my family was treated so well so many decades ago.
So I come at the text sometimes as a Canadian, now living in the US, and entering this country for the second time and living here for an extended period of time, I have been able to see firsthand now the political unrest and the marginalization in a brand new way that I do not necessarily see back from where I come from. And although it is sad to see that in a very real way in this specific country, I noticed the same thing happening in the Old Testament with these women, both Ruth and Esther. So you talked about Esther being an orphan, Ruth being a widow, Naomi being a widow. All of these were people in the Old Testament in Jewish culture that would be marginalized. And so how were they supposed to be treated? According to Mosaic law, God's law, the way that God speaks about the marginalized and the way that even Jesus in the New Testament treated the marginalized. What can we learn from that? And so I just looked up verse after verse after verse where Jesus and Mosaic law is asking for us and for the people of Israel at that time to treat people with respect, to provide justice for those who have been marginalized, mercy for those who have been marginalized, and protection for those who have been marginalized. And I find that those who are marginalized, the number one word that I could describe for these people is vulnerable. Vulnerability. Vulnerability to possibly those who are in power, whether it's government, those who might even be in power within our church. There are people who are marginalized and vulnerable within our institution as well. And over again, you see it in Deuteronomy 10:18, in the Psalms 68 verse 5, Isaiah 1:17, even in the New Testament, James 1:27, where God is asking us to defend the cause of the fatherless and the widow and to love the foreigner, the stranger that is within our gates. You even see that in the commandment of the Sabbath, right? How we should still give rest to the stranger that is within our gates, even if they are not believers like we are. And so there is a respect that comes from interacting with those who are vulnerable, those who are marginalized. And so with Ruth, Naomi, Esther, I see that God had a special place in his heart for each of them.
Thank you, Sarah. You know, I just want to kind of piggyback off that. Made me kind of think of a reflective question that, you know, as like what it means for our church today with the marginalized. The question is, are we as a church a refuge or are we a gatekeeper? Just something to reflect on. And are we elevating the people that are in the margins, or are we preserving comfort for those that are already included? So just some things to think about.
Take it one step further. Is your home a refuge? Are you a gatekeeper? Because it starts with you, it starts with me, right?
Wow. So we're going to add another phrase today. Are you, how was that, Pam? A gatekeeper or a refuge? Yeah, wow. Well, and I'm going to actually twist this a little bit. One of the things I was reading, it was someone who wrote about Ruth, had this to say. It says, the text, Ruth, masquerades as a treatise on the inclusion of the other. Really, it's a commentary on the assumed virtue of membership and participation in the Israelite community. So the critique being that, well, as you had said, Sarah, she had to leave everything to become, to go to the new. So was that a superior community kind of thing? And I was thinking about that. I'm like, well, then how do we put that into perspective of the call to come out of Babylon? How do we put that into perspective of, the remnant message on this, where we're called to come out of something to be part of something else? And does this story give us any, connection to that?
I'll start at that. Yeah. Wow, that's a good question. I think we need to be really careful not to slide into spiritual elitism, right? We just need to be so careful. And instead of kind of this superiority or the remnant or this idea of, or attitude that, I'm the faithful few or the righteous ones, being careful to remember, we have a saying in our family, eyes up, because it's so easy to sometimes look out here at all the chaos or the hurt that's been done to me as an individual, rather than lifting my eyes to the one, more important than anything else. And so instead of this superiority attitude, I think being understood as a community of witness, a community that actually serves and reach out. My daughter was telling me she was visiting with I'm trying to remember the name of it was a group, a church back in Michigan that she was visiting with somebody, and they were saying that they spend 2 weeks of the month out in service to others. And then the rest of it they spend in church getting fed. And I thought, what a beautiful way. And it really uplifted my daughter to say, wait, what am I doing today not just on Sabbath, but every day? What am I doing to be of service to others?
So I just want to piggyback off of Pam using the words, was it spiritual elitism? Ooh, I like that so much. And I want to push back on that commentator using the word superior, superior people. Culturally and historically, as Seventh-day Adventists, not everyone has said this from the pulpit, but many a preacher have, in which we are, the remnant, and that superiority complex has unfortunately, in previous generations, very much more so than now, really crept into our psyche. And so we have looked at others as being inferior than we are. And so I really want to push back on that commentary or commentator. When you look at Ruth chapter 1, the interesting piece is that Naomi and her husband leave Israel, the superior community, to go to where? Moab. For what? For food, because there was a famine in their own land. And so when there is a famine in your land as people of Israel, you think that God has done what? That you have displeased God. And so he is, smiting your land with famine. And it is only after he dies and her sons, Naomi's sons, get married to these two Moabite women, that then after a time she hears, it says here, she arose with her daughters-in-law that she might return from the country of Moab, for she had heard in the country of Moab, so she hears from where she is, that the Lord had visited his people, the people of Israel, by giving them bread. It is only when she realizes that there is now bread in her land that she decides to go back to the superior community. And so we have to remember that superiority is, what would the word be? I don't know. But what I want to say too with that is that in the Old Testament, when we look at the words, come out of Babylon, come out of her, my people, we're talking about a specific people, group, Babylon. In the New Testament, it's very different. In the New Testament, specifically in Revelation, Babylon takes on a much more symbolic meaning, and it's representing a system of spiritual confusion, moral corruption, and worldly influences that are in opposition to who God is. And so when we're looking at, come out of her, my people, come out of Babylon, I wouldn't necessarily look at Moab as Babylon, but I would look at, her going back to her people, us going back to God, instead of being in opposition of God, is more of a spiritual practice as opposed to a specific place.
I also have issue with that word, superior community. I think it just is going to ostracize people if we come across from that angle. We have a beautiful church. We have a message of love that we want to share. It's a gift that we want to share with people. So I think the desire needs to come not one from superiority, and I think we can all agree that we yearn to share this message. We care for people, and if that's where it's originating from, that you want to witness to somebody, that you're staying up late, you're worried about them, you're crying after them, you want to bring them in to this message, to this hope, to this promise, that's where it should come from, because we do have a gift to share. And the Lord cautions us to be careful with the trappings of this world and to be steadfast. But we can be steadfast in love and in acceptance and in kindness and still fulfill his message and grow closer to him. And we can draw people to us through our characters of kindness. They want to be near us just naturally, and then we can then have these conversations and show them love and read the scriptures with them and share with them where there's some differences maybe that they've been taught, and then we'll be growing the kingdom together. I mean, And so that's why I also kind of push back on the idea that we know what's best.
Sarah? Good.
Rosemary, I love what you were just saying, talking about kind of like a renewing of our character. And that reminds me of a verse in Romans 12 where it talks about do not be conformed to the world, right? Do not be conformed to Babylon, but be transformed by the renewing of our mind. If we have a superiority complex, that is not transformation through and being, that is more like being conformed to the world as opposed to transformation of our mind. And it's by the renewing of how we think. And that happens where, oh, Neil Nedley, you'd be so proud of me right now. That happens in the prefrontal cortex. It happens in this part of our brain, right? And so that's where all of our decision making is done. So renewing that part of our brain, thinking new thoughts, right? God asks us to, take every thought captive, correct? And so when we have that spiritual practice of taking every one of our thoughts captive, we're able to experience that transformation of our character.
So with all that said, thank you for sharing that. She's speaking my language, right? And I love the connection of how our mind and body works with Scripture, because really there is no more important. But to leave you with another question to reflect on that has to do with what we've been saying here, but are asking the question of ourselves, are we welcoming people into the life of God or into conformity with our culture? So I'll repeat that one more time. Are we welcoming people into a life of God or asking them to conform to our culture?
All right, well, I'm going to shift gears just a little bit back into what kind of we talked about at the beginning. And I'm going to say this as a man, when I read these, particularly Ruth, and Ruth is, I think we can all agree, is probably one of our best love stories. It's amazing. And I think all of us guys, we can identify with Boaz. We want to be that knight in shining armor, right? We want to be the woman who comes to us who needs help and we can rescue her, kind of thing. And so my question then is, I read Ruth and I see this, so I'm going to step back a little bit and have you guys respond a little bit to, as women, the story of Ruth, who comes in the middle of the night on the threshold, to Esther, who comes into the throne room awaiting a man's gold scepter, on this. What conflict do you see? And so throw a few words out here. We have, the breaking gender stereotypes. We have asserting agency, taking agency for yourself. Identity, your identity in this role and this thing. So I'm kind of throwing a lot of out there as we look at kind of the gender roles that we see, and these two women who kind of broke some of these gender roles or fit into it. How do you see this story?
So my grandmother used to tell me this all the time. Whether it's true or not, she would say, Sarah, yes, the man is the head, but the woman is the neck, and she can turn the head any way she wants.
It's my favorite line from one of my favorite movies, too.
And then I look at, let's say, colonial 1800s, and there was something that women used to do. Maybe we still do it today, it just doesn't look the same. But a woman, when she saw a man that she thought was worthy of her attention, she would do something very specific. She would take the handkerchief that she had in her bosom or in her pocket of her very huge corseted skirt, and she would drop it as she passed by that man. And it would give him a chance to save her, to see a damsel in distress, and to pick up that handkerchief, and give it back to her, and now they could start to have a conversation. She could thank him for being the knight in shining armor, and it started that conversation between the two of them. When I look at both Esther and Ruth, they have both approached their male counterparts in a very similar fashion, in a very female-oriented fashion, and have made it look like it is their idea to do what they decide to do. And so when Ruth communicates with Boaz, it is in that subtlety where she lays down at his feet, which also denotes honor and respect, which is something that you can see in Ephesians 5 and other places in the Bible, that God asks women to honor and respect their husbands. So she is already, prior to being a wife, showing wifely qualities. And she lays down at his feet, and then he decides to do what he does. And with Esther, the way that she communicates with him is that she plans a banquet. A way to a man's heart is through his stomach. And so she plans a banquet and realizes this might not be the right time, not yet, and so then plans a second banquet. And then it becomes his idea to say, hey, I'll give you whatever you want. And that's when, with subtlety, she comes in and makes her request. And instead of going toe-to-toe with Haman, which could have been her right, possibly, as the queen could have been, but instead of going toe-to-toe with Haman, which would be possibly more of a masculine way of doing things, she uses a very feminine way of doing things. And the other piece to this, too, sorry, I love this question. The other piece to this, too, is that both Esther and Ruth do not work solely or on their own. They both have advisors. They both have a multitude of counselors, which you see in Proverbs, where the way of wisdom is having a multitude of counselors. And so both Esther and Ruth do something very important that impacts multiple people and possibly multiple generations for Esther. And they both have counselors, people who know the language, who know the culture, who know the religious aspect. And so with Naomi behind Ruth and with Mordecai behind Esther, they are able to make the best decisions they possibly can for their people.
And then also, Esther drew upon prayer and fasting. So she had that faith to know that God was going to protect her and to request of Mordecai and her people to do the same. She believed in that method. She believed in prayer. She believed in fasting before going into a very difficult situation or making a very important decision. So I love that piece, and I draw that out of that story because it works. Drawing God into our situations, asking Him for help, going into a season of prayer, fasting, and being ready for what lies ahead. I know people today who do that. I know pastors' wives who fast and pray before the Sabbath, before entering the Sabbath. We can tap into that whenever we want. And so I love that piece of the story in Esther.
I'll just add a little to it, and I know we started off talking about gender, and I know gender differences is a really big topic today. But you know, this is something I tell my students because they often get in real heated, interesting discussions, I'll say. And as gender differences, I look at men and women and I realize, right, we are not, there's a lot of searching out for equality, but we are not equal in ability, but we are equal in value. we are equal in value. And I think when you look at this story, yes, there's a lot about the gender, but if you dive deeper, it really is about the spiritual, because God will use who is willing. That's who he's going to use. And I look at Esther 4:14. This was read earlier this morning. And it's leading up to this is this story, the conversation between Mordecai and Esther, and it has to write this like little phone tag kind of thing. It goes back and forth, or that's not what that's called. But so this is Esther 4:14, and I love this because this is God is using Mordecai, but for the value of Esther. And if you reflect back on this story, you know, right before this story, God calls the Israelites out of Persia to go back to Israel to build the temple. And only 40 or 50,000 leave. There are many, many, many Jews that stay. They don't leave. They're comfortable. It's easy. Or for whatever reason that they stay. And so, and it really, I think in summary, this verse 4:14, I love how the Lord uses Mordecai to encourage. This verse ends with, I think, one of the most famous things, like Jeff said earlier, for such a time as this. And I have always seen that. But studying this week, and based on your question, Jeff, it really brought about a whole new way of me seeing it. It's the first part of this verse that really struck me. And it says this, Mordecai is speaking to Esther, "For if you remain completely silent, if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance will come from someone else." He knew God was going to take care of it, but he was letting Esther know, but you can be the avenue. You just need to choose it. And so Esther did. Right after this, right? And he says, how do you even know this isn't for such a time as this, that everything has happened because of this? And so I love that verse. I think it's so powerful in how it speaks to this idea that God has got us covered. He's going to take care of it. And if we don't step up to be the voice when we would prefer to remain silent, sometimes things are scary. Silence is sometimes easier. And sometimes silence is necessary. But in this case, it wasn't. And she was able to stand and face the difficult time.
Just piggybacking off of what Pam just said, this is a shameless plug for women in ministry. We need each other, both males and females in ministry, in all areas of our church organization. And when I look at the way that both Mordecai and Esther work together, I can see that we can do great things for God. Esther took that faith step and went for it. Action was there. But she needed Mordecai. She needed the reminder of her identity. She needed a reminder of her duty to her people. She needed a reminder that she was in a place of influence. She needed a reminder of what her purpose might be for such a time as this. And so for such a time as this, in these last days, we need all hands on deck, no matter if we are young or old, no matter if we are females or males. We need all hands on deck. And the most amazing thing about this too is that as we have all hands on deck, we need to remember that if we are, for example, like Esther, being a female, taking that faith step, she had Mordecai not only to back her up and in her ear, but at the same time, he was also someone who was already being an example of what it looked like to go against the grain. The way that he would not bow down to Haman. He was already setting an example for Esther of what it looked like, faith in action.
And I love the example of Mordecai and the example of Naomi. Now, those were trusted elders. And we have elders in our church, and they have wisdom, and they have a lot to share. Let's not forget that. They can be trusted. They can give good counsel. And this took many years, these relationships. It was a relationship that Ruth had with Naomi. It took many years to build up. These are relationships that you're probably already working on in your own families, with your children. Mordecai had a relationship with Esther. She trusted him. So there was respect and there was love. So that was built over time so that when Esther needed that counsel and when Ruth needed that counsel, there was no doubt that they were going to follow through from their trusted family elders. And so I would encourage all of us to think of ways to be that person in your own family, family members who are lost or wayward, to embrace them and to start working on that relationship of trust so that you can share these beautiful, beautiful promises and counsel that God has given you. So I just want to say that.
Well, the old adage is you leave them wanting more, right? Because we're out of time. And we had one more question to get to, and I just want to briefly, we don't have time for the question, but the lesson, once again, talking about the illusion of women and the church, and then looking at Boaz and Ruth as the kinsman redeemer, Christ figure, and Ruth as the church, and then looking to the end time where the bridegroom and the bride come together. So you were talking about relationships, you're talking about this relationship that we have, the working together between Esther and Mordecai. So these things, how God wants to work with us in a relationship to, as we've been referencing this whole week, being ambassadors to bring the message, to bring the gospel to the whole world. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your insight, your wisdom. Can we give them a round of applause, please? Thank you. This time I'd like to call Pastor Navarro up, and he's going to have a ministry presentation.
All right, did everybody see that? You had 5 seconds to see it. So as she speaks, I'll try and put it back up. This is, good morning everyone, happy Sabbath. This is, behind me is Sister Martina Martinez. She is our Arizona Conference Women's Ministries Coordinator. And I am so happy to be able to introduce her. We have had various discussions about women's ministries, and the reason why I'm up here is the Executive Secretary's office has a couple of ministries under its department, and one of them is women's ministries. And so we have become friends, and I have just been so impressed with Sister Martina's organizational skills. They're just outstanding, and we committee meeting some months back to be our new coordinator, and so she has something that she wants to share with you all, specifically our ladies in the congregation. So Martina, the time is yours, and I'm going to see if that sign won't come down again. Maybe I did it wrong.
Thank you. Happy Sabbath, everybody. I'm so grateful to be here today, and I'm so happy and so blessed. And I just want to introduce myself again, Martina Martinez. I also have a team behind me, right? I'm not the only one that works in here. We have actually the coordinator for the Asian Pacific. We have Jels Garcia Finland, and we also have the Black Ministries coordinator, Rosie Kennedy, that we work together. I also have the blended group, which is Carol Howerton, I don't know if she's here today or not. We also have the Native American coordinator, which is Carol Davis Utile. And we also have the Hispanic Women's Coordinator, which is me. And we also have, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, do I have another one? I think there's 5 of us. So I'm so grateful and so thankful for the help that they also have the knowledge and all the skills that each one of them actually brings on to the table for the women's ministries. As a woman, I don't know if you know what women's ministry is all about, right? And we know the purpose in the mission for women's ministry is actually to encourage, equip, train, promote, nurture, and also challenge the Seventh-day Adventist women in their journey as disciples, right, of Jesus Christ. And also to know and to experience the love in their lives with Jesus Christ. One of the objectives or few objectives that we have actually is, like I said, use their talents for all the women that we have in our conference to actually, to glorify God. Especially, we have a lot of people, they have talents, and God has given them those gifts for a purpose. And if you have a talent and you're not utilizing, I encourage you to go to your women's ministry leader in your churches and say, I'm here to work, right? I'm here to serve, for the honor and glory to my God by putting my talents and by putting my gifts to work for the community. Discipleship, we also have, right? We help the women grow in their faith and understanding of the scripture, right? We have Bible studies, and we have also groups that we get together, and we actually encourage newcomers, right? New believers into these groups to actually give them the discipleship. We support and encourage every single woman in our churches, right? And to actually heal and encourage to put their services into God by bringing them, by having different events or different activities that would actually help them, right? To be more spiritual strength and faith based. We also do mentorship. We actually have, right, a mentorship for young ladies in our conferences. And we also have in our churches as well. In each local church, we also have the young ladies department. We also hold leadership events in our conferences every year for all those new leaders that actually are, welcome to grow in their leadership skills. We also, as part of this revamping and restructuring of the women's ministry in our conference, one of the things that we are doing is updating our website and that we have in our conference. And along with that, if you would like to go to the next slide, please. We have a digital platform that we have built to actually, where we actually put all the events in this digital platform. And we also have a Facebook page, and we also have different digital platforms that we actually announce in all the events that we have. We have a calendar of events, not just conference events. We also have local church events, and as well as the North American division events and general associations conference events as well. So there's a list in those digital platforms.
Okay, we're going
We
to
also
break
have a
away from the
calendar
conference for a
events.
little bit.
And one of the
Give
things
you
that
a
is
few
coming up
minutes
right now,
to
we have
stretch
a
your
4-week
legs.